All right, we're going to be covering the social cognitive career theory, and I just wanted to discuss kind of it and how it's merged with some social learning concepts and things as well. So basically, you're, like I said, merging different career theories and kind of concepts from learning theories as well. So some influencers on this particular career theory was Super, Holland, Crumbles, Lovex, and Davis. So there's different career theories that kind of merge together with this one. So it's a very complicated, kind of takes into account a lot of different factors. So we'll kind of go through it slowly so you can get a good idea of it. It's basically going to explain how different vocational career interests develop, how we kind of make our occupational choices. So we're talking about interest development, we're talking about choices. We're also talking about how we choose the level of success or stability that we're going to have within careers. And then it's going to bring into that piece life satisfaction and career satisfaction within a work environment. And then also talk about how we're going to make work adaptation. So basically, how are we going to negotiate different things that might happen within our career that maybe are planned or unplanned? So kind of what we're going to do inside of that career once we are in it. Like I said, it's merging some different concepts all together to house them in one theory. So person environment fit is kind of related to this because we're talking about interests and traits that people have. We're talking about how we adapt to environment. So those are person environment fit concepts that are also kind of being merged into a developmental model because it's talking about how we're going to develop those interests over time, right? And then it also kind of brings in some tasks that maybe need to be done as well throughout our development. So it's merging those two models kind of together, and it's also going to focus on cognitions and behavior. So it's bringing in this social learning piece, how we learn behaviors, how we learn to think and have those cognitive schemas around work. So those are big pieces of this that kind of we all merge together. So the foundational idea here is based on Bandura's work in social cognitive theory, and then they've just adapted and put it into work and career settings. So a big piece of this is that people are self-directed, that we're going to make choices that are going to be hopefully along the path that fits who we are uniquely ourselves. It is a complex interaction between behavior and environment and cognition. So all of those kind of pieces fall into line. Now is how we assess where clients are and where they need to go. Self-efficacy is a huge part of Bandura's work, and that is basically our belief on whether or not we're capable of doing the things that we are choosing to do. So whether or not we believe we're good at math, or whether we're going to be able to do great at networking, right? So it's these different pieces. It is not a global trait. So sometimes people will confuse self-efficacy with self-esteem. Self-esteem is somewhat of a global trait. I don't even like to use the word self-esteem because it's very vague. I typically talk about self-efficacy as in our predicted outcomes, our predicted thoughts about how well we're going to perform at certain tasks. And then I also talk about self-worth, and that is just our basic worth as a human being. And those are two different things. One is a very global concept that we are worth something no matter what we add to the table or whatever we're bringing to life, right? We don't have to do anything to be worth something. So self-worth is just a given. Self-efficacy is very trait specific. So I kind of differentiate through some of those so you can understand that self-efficacy is very much a piece of this, but it's very task specific. So you can have self-efficacy in one area and not in another. Does that make sense? I'm hoping. If you have questions about that, please let me know, because it's really important that we understand that, because we're going to be assessing that as we're talking to our clients. Self-efficacy beliefs are formed through personal performance, right? So if we do well at something, we're more likely to believe we're going to do well at it the next time. So this also plays into some social environment pieces, is how those are developed, because if you don't have opportunities to perform at certain tasks, then you may not know. You may not believe that you're able to do those things. So if you never did sports, how would you know you might be good at sports? You might be athletic, right? So it's that piece that is also a part of that. The more you're able to be successful, the more you are going to have self-efficacy beliefs around those things. So opportunities is really important to foster for people. Vicarious learning, and that is just seeing other people do that, and then also believing that you possibly could do that because you're kind of like them, right? So it's that role model piece that you see people like you doing that particular job or that task, and so you believe that you will probably do it as well. And then social persuasion, that is your peer pressure or your teachers, right? Or your coaches, mentors, telling you you can do this, that they believe in you. And so that's important. The more you have that social support piece, the more likely you are going to believe that you can perform well at things. So that is a big piece of this theory also, is that you're going to try to help build social support and have them find people that are also going to help build their self-efficacy by those positive enforcers and influences. Physiological and affective states also impact self-efficacy. So like how you feel about it. If you're getting really anxious, that's a big piece of this. Anxiety can lead to you believing that you're not really good at it, even though you may be good at it. Because I don't know how many clients who have told me that they get anxious and people can't tell that they're anxious. So they believe they're not good at it, when in reality, I'm like, what is the feedback? And so I'm always looking for evidence that contradicts their anxiety, because oftentimes anxiety isn't necessarily a predictor, right? They may be doing well at their job, and so they need to find that other evidence that's telling them that they are capable, even though they are feeling anxiety. So the other thing that's here to note is prior performance is the greatest influence on self-efficacy. So that having that opportunity to be successful at something is the biggest influence that they're going to have on whether or not they believe they can do it. So it's that opportunity. You want them to get opportunities to be successful. So you're going to definitely want to promote those, particularly if you're dealing with like adolescents and young adults. They don't have a lot of experience in the world, so that you're wanting to get them out there to give it a try. So I oftentimes pose it at that. Why don't you give it a try in a lower risk situation, so volunteering or something like that. So that way they're not worried about losing their job, they're not worried about those repercussions, right? So doing it in a way that's low risk, but trying something out to find out that they can do that. The other big piece of this, and that's just that cognitive piece, right, is we also have concepts not only about our abilities, but about the outcomes of performing those tasks, what that might lead to. So oftentimes, I don't know how many teenagers I've worked with that are worrying about judgment, right? If I do this, then they're going to think that. And that's always this they. So it's that piece of like, what's going to happen if I do those things? I might be able to help as a doctor, might be a positive thing, but I'm not really good at science. So that you are predicting you're going to fail your science classes, right? Or another one might be high self-efficacy, where you really believe that you can do well at that, but there might be negative outcomes that you don't really want to look into. Like, I don't want to be seen as a nerd, even though I am great at math. What's the social ramifications of that? So we're always looking at these anticipated beliefs of what's going to happen, whether we're going to be self-evaluated, we're going to judge ourselves, other society is going to judge us, whether we're going to get the predicted rewards or consequences that may come from doing that particular task, right? So I love this quote, and I think it fits really well here, that oftentimes we're all caught up in our head worrying about things. So oftentimes many of us are not living our dreams because we're actually living our fears inside of our head. So sometimes we got to get our clients outside of their heads so they're not living in their fears and they can live in what's actually happening. So I've had so many clients who are so anxious that people don't like them, so anxious that they're not doing well at their job. And when we sit down and look at the evidence, what did your supervisor say the other day to you? What did your coworker say to you the other day? And they are living in their fears instead of living in the reality is that they're doing very well, right? They might be doing well. So there's that piece of trying to get them out of those cognitive distortions that may be there as well with this theory. Personal goals is another big piece of this. Again, social cognitive theory tends to focus on those SMART goals, right? You want to definitely put them in these realistic steps that they can obtain. So when you're looking at that, and so people do have this intention to want to do something. The more vague or long-term their goals are, the less likely they are to be motivated and the less likely they are to act upon that. So we're looking at those pieces of how we do that with them, right? Helping them form those goals. But they have two different kinds of goals that we're going to be looking at, and that's choice content goals, which is basically what are you going to be doing, the what, and the performance goals, the how. The how are you going to do it? So what level of quality performance you may want to do. So for example, I was very interested in dancing as a teenager, and I got really into that. And did I want to do that as a career? No. So like content, I would like to keep doing that. Dance is great. It's fun. It's very therapeutic for me. But performance goals, what level of performance do I want to have with that? How much time do I want to invest in that? And how far do I want to go with that? Right. So it's that piece. Do I want to be a professional dancer? No, I didn't really want that as my career. So can I be a hobby dancer? Right. So it's checking out those pieces of what do they want to do and the how do they want to do it? How far do they want to go with that? All right, so again, we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but we're going to review and then we're going to break these down. So the 5 overlapping models within this theory, or pieces that are really important, is that there's a piece that talks about developing interest and how those happen. There's a piece that talks about how we're going to make our career choices. And there's a piece on the influences that are playing a role, so that environmental piece. And then there's that piece on satisfaction or well-being. And then there's going to be a piece on how we manage our career once we're in that career. And we're going to talk about all of those. So the interest model. We're going to get our interest from lots of different places, but primarily as a youth growing up, right, you're going to have home, your school system, and your community, right? So you may get some influences from your parents, your siblings, you may get that from your peers at school, your teachers, you may have coaches or activities that you're involved with in the community that you see. So those models, some role models, some encouragement and feedback there. So as you practice and you're engaging in these different activities throughout your youth, you're going to be getting constant feedback about whether or not you're good at this, you should continue doing it or not, right? So probably as you look back over your youth, your younger days, you have received feedback in certain areas, whether or not you should do this or that, or right, teacher saying, well done, you're a great writer, or maybe you need some tutoring, right? So there's these pieces where we're learning what is going to happen. We're learning where we are going to be successful and where we're not. And so we're forming that belief of self-efficacy in different tasks as we try them out as a youth. And again, bringing in just some environmental pieces. Some youth are going to be able to try out more activities than others, depending on their socioeconomic status, their environment. So maybe a rural youth versus someone who's in a big city, right? There's going to be different resources and different environmental factors that will probably impact their interests as well within that larger context. So you have the self-efficacy and outcome expectations that are forming, and they're going to impact career interests, right? And then on top of that, the contextual factors also will impact your career interests and your choices and actions. So there may be barriers and things within that contextual environment that also impact it. And as you look through your book, there will be graphical representations of how all those kind of play a role and influence each other. The social cognitive theory, contextual influences, we talked about slightly, but basically those are psychological, social effects of gender, ethnicity, SES, maybe even sexual orientation, right, on your interests and your skill development. So there's, in particular, looking at male-typed professions, female-typed activities, right? So there's certain things that stereotypically are considered more male-like professions or female-like activities. So looking at those and how you are pushed or not pushed in certain directions. So oftentimes women are pushed more into helping professions, and they're complemented more on those sorts of things, artistic or helping sorts of areas where boys are tended to be complemented more on what they're building or what they're capable of in like the science or math categories, right? So there's those pieces of that. And I've seen that just watching some of my kids go through school, that there are certain things that they're not even available for some genders, right? They just don't have those groups for them. And then you're going to perpetuate those patterns of gender segregation within those certain fields. So it's just like long-term effects that there'll be less adults that go into those certain fields as well as you're looking at that. So that's just on gender, but it's some ethnicity pieces there that will influence people as well as SES and what's just available to them. So for example, in Kentucky, there's a significant area of Kentucky that is very rural, does not have a lot of resources for other job opportunities. So a lot of people that work there work in the coal mines because that is the option that they have. And getting outside of that would be very difficult, just as far as financial goes, as far as getting a higher education goes, that there's significant barriers in the way of that. And so they see the need to make an income to take care of their families that kind of trumps that career choice option. So they just choose what is there because of the barriers. The choice model is talking about how we make those choices, like I was talking about. There's a lot of contextual factors that fit into that as well. It's a dynamic process that continues to happen. So don't think of it as one career choice. And I've had to talk to many clients about that you make many, many choices about your career, particularly those who are in high school and college age. They really struggle with the idea that they have to make this one lifetime decision about what they are going to do for the rest of their life. And that is extremely intimidating for a lot of people. So I always break that down to like, you're going to make lots of choices. You're going to make a lot of decisions. I have changed my career so many times, and I explain to them that this is very much a process that a lot of adults have gone through, that they make a lot of career shifts and interest shifts happen, value shifts happen as we grow throughout life. So we can't decide one career necessarily. It's very rare that one person is going to stay in the same career. So there's some research in that too. So sometimes I pull that in as I'm working with clients, but it's helpful for them to understand that there's a series of choices going to happen. And someone was like, let's break it down to 5 years, make it more manageable. What's something that you think you could do for 5 years, right? And then go from there. So they're going to have a primary choice, right? Their goal to enter a particular field. So they're going to want to narrow down to that. What can you do for 5 years? Right? Narrow it down, make it more manageable for them to decide, and then start breaking it down into the steps. What is it going to take to get into that particular field that you're thinking you can manage to do for 5 years? And then there'll be subsequent performance sort of experiences, successful, failure. You're going to get feedback from supervisors or your training program, professors. That's going to affect future choices along the way. And then hopefully you're going to adapt as you receive feedback. You will adapt to that, because that's the whole idea of feedback, right? That you learn as you grow through this process. So that's the choice model. You're making lots of different choices, and it's influenced in lots of different ways through those feedback loops and continued decisions. So here's kind of what that looks like. There's probably, if I remember right, another graphical representation of this in your book. So goals equal actions. So you make some goals, then you take some steps. Then you're going to have that performance task, and you're going to get a feedback whether or not you're doing well on that, whether you need to improve here, right? Then you're going to make some more goals so that you can improve, hopefully, right? You're going to do the action, and then you're going to get that feedback again. So it's those pieces of just continual growth that's important to recognize and helps your clients recognize as well. Like I said, in the choice model, it also takes into account contextual environmental influences. So their choice may be constrained. And so it's always helpful to look at barriers that may be limiting their choices, because that's important to validate for them, and also important for us to help make goals to help remove the barriers or get around the barriers or manage with the barriers, right? Or understand the barrier may constrict their choice, but that they still have choices within that. So SES, prior education, or some rural versus city, that's another, just where they live. Can they move? Can they not? Family influences, gender role, stereotyping, those sorts of things. So the distal background influences that they're talking about are more societal based ones, right? So gender, cultural expectations, your career models, what you have seen in that career. So for example, there's a researcher who does a lot on implicit bias. And I and my daughters went to one of their little displays and talked about that with them. And he brought up this scenario where this son and his dad was in a car accident. And when they brought them to the emergency room, the doctor said, I can't operate on him, on the son, because he's my son. And then we're asked, how can that be possible? And the first thing that's popping into my daughter's mind is, oh, it must be a gay couple, and they must have adopted this son, or blah, 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 right? And we didn't count for the fact that the the surgeon could actually be a female doctor, right? Because how many of us have female doctors, and how often do we see female doctors on movies, right? So it's that idea that our background influence, our career models that are available to us may be somewhat limited. We may not see ourselves in that career because we don't have a role model that we can see in that career choice. So that might be the true of female engineers too, right? So why do we even say female in engineer? It's very rare that you may see an engineer that's female. So it's understanding those pieces that are influencing clients as well, that they may discredit something because they just haven't seen it yet. And then your proximal environmental influences, those are more your family system, your peer groups, your closer, right? Proximal, that's what proximal means. So your emotional and financial support is really key, whether or not they're going to get that help from someone in their social structure, right? Or whether they're going to have barriers, if their family's going to be against the career choice that they have, or discourage them. That support piece is really important. So I don't know if you have recognized that in your own life, that where you ended up may have been directly because somebody encouraged you, or somebody said you can do this, or I can help you with that, right? That support piece is really, really key. And that's actually some of what my dissertation was on, is professors supporting mothers in particular in their graduate programs. So that we found that is helpful when professors are very supportive. So that piece is really a key piece in whether or not you are going to continue down that path. And then again, your self-efficacy directly impacts that in some way, and your expected outcomes in that career. Again, strong supports and weak barriers are going to increase your career, the likelihood you're going to follow your career interests, right? So strong support, weak barriers, that's what you want to see. That doesn't always happen. Job availability and economic need may override your interest. So that's what I was talking about in that scenario where there may be very little ability to leave. There may be a lot of barriers, and yet you need to survive, right? You need to provide for your family. So that economic need just may override your job choice. The performance model is basically talking about that interplay of your self-efficacy and your performance, right? And how that impacts your persistence within a career. So you're focusing both on the level and the quality of attainment, how far you're going to go, where you're going to get promoted, how advanced you want to be within that. So just focusing on counselors, like you can get your license, right? But then there's all these different credentials that you can get on top of that, specialties, training on top of that. So how far do you want to go in the counseling field? Do you want to have a specialty degree? Do you want to have extra letters behind your name, right? How far do you want to go in that level of attainment is a piece of this. And then as you perform and you're successful in those certain areas, you may persist or may grow further. If you run into barriers, that may impact your choice, and you may decide that you don't feel like this is a good fit for you, right? So there's that piece as well. You may shift careers. So again, this is an interplay among your ability, your self-efficacy, your outcome, and your performance goals. They all influence how you continue throughout your career. So I don't know, there's some joke out there that people get promoted to their level of inabilities, basically, and then they stop getting promoted, they get stuck there. But they get promoted to the point where they actually can't function well. Hopefully they're getting extra trainees, but that is kind of a joke of some career fields. The satisfaction model is basically your experience of well-being and satisfaction within your career. So that, I think, aligns a lot with your value system. What you value and what you prioritize needs to be reflected as well in your environment that you're working in. So your personality traits may also influence this, in particularly some open-mindedness, agreeableness, right? Some things that make you a little bit more adaptable to different environments can really be helpful. Particularly when work conditions aren't great, right? And then the work conditions, of course, are going to impact whether or not you feel satisfied, whether you're getting your needs met within that field, whether or not you feel like you're getting support from your coworkers or your supervisor, whether or not you feel like that environment is healthy for you as far as working with those other people in that situation, right? Can be a huge impact on people's career satisfaction. I've met many people that are struggling with that piece of the work conditions are not fitting, or the organizational support isn't there, and that really will cause them to shift careers oftentimes are shift jobs. Just recognizing that work conditions are what is the cause, not necessarily their abilities or performance, right? The career self-management models, again, how do you negotiate those shifts and changes that may happen and occur in your field? So how did you handle COVID? What did you guys do for your job shift there? And making those decisions and negotiating those events and challenges. Sometimes they're plans, like a promotion, right? They're maybe trying for that rank advancement or something. And some are unplanned, like COVID happening or layoffs happening or things like that. So it's those adaptive behaviors that are really key to helping you survive in the work field. And you want to definitely help your clients engage in those adaptive behaviors when they hit something hard and difficult. So it's that ability to explore other career paths, make other career decisions, search for jobs, adapt your skills, get further training, network with people, manage for those different roles that you may have, maybe taking on some volunteer stuff so that you can get some experience somewhere else, right? It's how do you adapt to that piece. Planning for retirement is another particular adaptive situation where you may have clients that need assistance with that. So the specific career sort of adaptation to it. So overall, the research on social cognitive career theory, there's a large amount of research on particularly self-efficacy and particularly on those outcome expectations, right? And those are a good predictor of interest. So there's a lot of research on that. There's several meta-analysis. This research has been gathered over several years since Bandura's work first came out, right? So there is quite a bit of research on it, and is basically mostly positive that this career theory has some validity. And it also talks about the performance accomplishments also leading to further interest and self-efficacy going up, right? So you'll continue to grow. Self-efficacy and outcome expectations predict career choices, indirectly linked to interest. It also has some predictors with satisfaction as well. So that's important. So those are definitely pieces. It's got some really good research behind it. So I would definitely check out some of those articles that your book may cite on that. There's probably some newer ones as it comes out, because every time your textbook is printed, it becomes old news. So the application of social cognitive career theory, we're going to talk specifically about children and adolescents in particular, because that's typically where you're going to be looking at some of these things. But school-based programs can really help students broaden their experiences with occupational options, right? And so I think that is sort of what some of the politicians in making the career readiness piece, college or career readiness piece is about. So I don't know how your high schools are set up, but oftentimes they'll have career pathways. So they'll have some classes that are specifically designed for those different careers so they can get an idea of whether or not they're going to be a good fit for that particular career. So some of those classes are really important to have in a school-based program because they may not be able to experience in their home life that particular situation. So for example, I grew up and my dad is a construction worker, owns a construction business. My brothers all learned how to build, to do basic construction, basic framework and those sorts of things. But having a class inside of the school for someone who maybe didn't have that at their home life, couldn't learn that from a parent, right, would be really key for them to understand whether that's a good fit for them or whether they're going to be good at that. So some of those vocational courses are really helpful for that. Extracurriculars are also another place where that could be a key area. Clubs, such as mock trial, debate team, those things, whether or not you're going to be good at those particular aspects of different careers, right? So that is a big piece of advocating for that, is helping kids that age get into that. Also, not that this is a little bit higher cost, right? In college, take some classes that you might just want to take that maybe aren't in your major, but you just are interested in it. You may find that that's what you need to go into. So that I kind of encourage them to broaden that a little bit. And oftentimes there's that whole push to take general education requirements the first couple of years. I'm like, maybe you should try a class that actually will give you an idea if this is a good major for you. So for example, my first major was occupational therapy. And I took an internship class where I actually had to work with an occupational therapist for certain many hours, right? And I learned that I probably didn't want to work with that population because it was in a nursing home, and that was really depressing for me, and it was really sad. And I remember in particular one lady that we worked with, and the occupational therapist, the whole time he's like, just don't tell her she's going to walk again. Don't make that promise. And that's all she ever talked about, was being able to walk again. And I couldn't tell her. So that was like a hard thing for me. I want to believe people can change and grow and get better, right? And he's like, she's not going to walk. She's not going to walk again. It's not going to happen. Do not encourage her to keep trying, but she's probably not going to walk again. So that was me learning that occupational therapy, particularly with that population, was not really a good fit for me, because it was really hard for me to not have that, not want to give them that hope, right? So it's finding those things. So like I love to encourage work studies, those sorts of things where they can actually get in on the job shadowing, internships, and trying to do that earlier rather than making this huge investment in like college courses. So it's that piece, right? That's really well designed for this particular theory, is that experience helps them gain self-efficacy. It also maybe helps inform them with this negative feedback that this is not where they want to be. And that's key too. So again, consider the 4 sources of efficacy as you're designing your interventions for your clients. That personal performance, that personal experience with that task is really key here. So I always try to find ways for them to experiment with that in a low risk situation, kind of my goal there. And then the vicarious learning piece is find role models, connect them. So some career campuses are, it's probably less likely in a high school, but the idea of connecting them with somebody they can job shadow with, connecting them with somebody that's in that field so they can interview them. So I love those kind of assignments where they're connected with somebody, particularly that may be similar to them, that's in a job role that they're interested in, so they can learn vicariously through that person whether this is a good fit for them. Social persuasion, encouragement, that's a big piece there, and I'm Adlerian is very much an encouraging field. So that is my foundational theory. So I'm very much on this, encourage them to attempt new tasks. It's okay if you fail, it's fine. Failure is part of learning. So I'm always doing that as well. You got to step out of your comfort zone. I don't know how many times I've said that. Yes, it's uncomfortable outside your comfort zone. It's the only way you grow your comfort zone. Those sorts of things is that social persuasion, getting them to try things and getting them to build their social network that is also going to be positive for them, right? He's going to encourage them. And the physiological and affective states, again, that has a lot to do with anxiety, because we get really anxious when we're trying things outside of our comfort zone. So it's that relaxation exercises, mindfulness-based things. It's helping them to reduce the anxiety that they have in trying some of these things out. So this is the same for adults as it is for children, but particularly it's really important to build that as they're younger, so that they can have that experience. So career choice and implementations, this is when they're actually trying to make the choice. You want to look at expanding choice options, because oftentimes people reject viable options because of their self-efficacy beliefs. So like, I can't do math. I'm not even going to look at that because it has a math class. Or the outcome expectations. I'm not going to make enough money. Does money matter? What is enough money? What do you really need to feel happy, right? So it's looking at the options they rejected and why they rejected them, and helping them explore that. Standardized measures can do that. So there's lots of career interest inventories out there, values and needs inventories, aptitude tests. So there's tons of those that may help them relook at things. There's another one that I will probably link this too, because it's a free resource. There's a vocational card sort of thing. That there's a vocational one and there's a value one. I'll have to find the vocational one. But it's talking about just tasks that might be something you'd be interested in, putting them into categories, and you can shift those categories as you need to modify them for your clients, right? So something you may choose to do, something you would never want to do, something that's maybe unsure, maybe I would do that. Or like it mentions in your book, I might choose this if I thought I had the skills, if I thought I could, if I thought I was smart enough or whatever, right? If I would choose this under different circumstances, those sorts of things. And then the second piece here is coping with the barriers and building support. So again, it's recognizing that there may be barriers in the way of implementing some of the choices. How can we cope with them or kind of work our way around them? Analyze that likelihood. I always try to put a percentage on it. Sometimes it's last, how likely is this going to happen that you may fail a college class? 10%, I don't know, do we need to plan for that? Now let's check. If it's a very low percentage, maybe you don't need a plan for that. But if there is a possibility that something is going to get in the way, what is your plan for that? And how do you prepare to cope with those barriers that are going to be in that way? So particularly one is finances, right? How do you do that? And helping them manage how they would go about that. So who can they ask for help? And things may fall in there too, or grants or financial aid, right? Those sorts of things. Maybe they work part-time while they go to school. Maybe they take just one class at a time and go through it slowly. So it's figuring out those paths for them. And then again, building supports. I think that's really key. I think support is really key to helping people succeed. So helping them find those mentors and those people that are going to encourage them along their path, and maybe who provide emotional support or even material support, right? So maybe they read their paper, maybe they let them job shadow, maybe they, pay one of their tuition bills. Those sorts of things are really helpful for people. Goal setting and self-regulation is the other piece here. So you're going to want to look at the environmental supports and barriers so that you can set goals that will help cope with them and help build those things. Again, it's really helpful to have a framework. So I like the SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right? Those are really a good framework to try to help clients narrow down their goals to something that's really, really reachable and short term. Those vague long range goals, clients don't tend to get to. You got to find something they can do this week, and I always kind of break it down. Before I see you next time, this is what we're going to do. I'll check in with the next time. And having that accountability with you as a counselor can be really helpful as well in that. Okay, so work performance. I mentioned this earlier, that you're going to examine discrepancies between self-efficacy beliefs and the objective, what is actually happening in their skills and performance. So I've had so many clients that are really, they have anxiety, right? They have mental health issues. So they have anxiety or ADHD. And oftentimes with that comes this self-efficacy that they're not doing well when they really are doing just fine. So it's looking at those and objectively saying, okay, well, what happened at your last employee review? What happened was what your boss said about this, or what your supervisor said about this. What are your coworkers? And ask specifically what feedback they're getting, and challenge some of the self-efficacy beliefs that are negative when they maybe don't need to be. Now there is the opposite, right? That can happen where they have high self-efficacy when really the objective evidence is saying they probably shouldn't. And that's also something that maybe you need to bring up, that, hey, you may believe you're doing well here, but what is happening here? So it's reviewing that discrepancy there and helping make goals that will help them in that area. Remedial skill building efforts, that might be something that's needed. What can you do to address this negative feedback you got from your supervisor, right? That can be really key. So it's helping them identify those steps. And sometimes it's going back to the supervisor. Okay, what is it that you want? Because oftentimes supervisors are not very good about giving specific feedback, right? So what is it that you're really needing from me, and helping them build that plan. And then identifying suitable alternatives if that particular job situation is not going to work, or that particular career float's not going to work given the feedback that they're getting. And promoting work satisfaction. So this is basically increasing that work environment person fit. So that's that environment fit kind of model. And that's where it's playing around here. You'll want to do a multifaceted assessment, right? So again, assessment is a big part of career counseling. You're going to look at their lifestyle, their values, their priorities, that is really a key factor for them in being satisfied with their career, and then focus on either changing the person, like maybe skill development, or changing mind shift, right, about some certain things. So they're seeing the positives versus the negatives. So they may be modifying the person somewhat to fit the environment better, or you may be trying to shift the environment some. Can you work from home one day a week? Is your boss going to be okay with that? Could you ask for more flexible hours? Could you, whatever is going to help their environment be healthier for them? Can you ask for benefits? Can you ask, can you shift the environment? What can change there? And then considering job career change, if that work satisfaction is not going to be available within that environment, if you can't change that environment or person enough for that fit to lead to satisfaction and fulfillment, then you may consider career changes. Coping and compensatory strategies is very helpful because most work environments tend to have some, and particularly in the United States, tend to have some overworking their employees sort of mindset, right? They're going to want to get as much from you with the least amount of pay as possible. That's kind of, the economy that we live in, and the mindset that a consumerism economy kind of feeds into employers. So what can you do to cope? What sort of things? So some of the things that we tend to decide together with my clients is that they need to take their lunch break. I don't know how many people work with a lunch break. I'm guilty of that one as well sometimes, right? So take your lunch break, go for a walk in the middle of the day. Can you make sure you're going to the gym before you get home, or before this or that, right? What can you do that helps you cope and de-stress within that work environment or after you've worked that day? Another big one for a lot of people, particularly in the helping professions, and so I cover this in other courses that I teach as well, is having that barrier between their personal life and your work. That can get really interrupted today because of technologies. Your boss can have access to you all the time, or maybe your clients or students, right, can have access to you all the time through technology. And so it's having those barriers. When will you check your phone? Do you want your email on your phone? Do you want to take work with you everywhere you go? And how to set up some boundaries with possibly some supervisors or bosses that don't have a lot of boundaries. I've worked with many clients I've had to have that conversation, and is your boss supposed to be texting you on Sunday, on your days off, and asking you to do work stuff? I'm like, they own you 24/7. I don't know if that's a healthy way to see things. So can you have that conversation with, I'm taking Sunday off. I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to check my text. And having those sorts of conversations as well to promote that work-life balance that's needed to be healthy. That is the end of this. All right, so that kind of wraps up. We'll kind of summarize that social cognitive career theory is basically the idea that our beliefs about ourselves, our beliefs about our career are all impacting us in various ways. We develop those beliefs throughout time through lots of different environmental influences and feedback. And then our choices are definitely impacted by those environmental feedback loops that we're having as well. So it's that idea that our cognitions and our social environment are all at this great interplay with each other that causes us to adapt to those different social environments, those different work environments, and make different choices depending on how we're perceiving things, right? So you may be focusing on changing the person's perception. You may be focused on changing the environment with their experiences. You're definitely going to want to increase that self-efficacy with many of your clients so that they can be brave, get over that anxiety and try something new, or ask for changes within their environment, right? So that's kind of social cognitive career theory in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and let me know.